I have two extremely well-known speakers on the panel, Dr. Aruna Roy, that education has to teach us how to live in a harsh and cruel world without losing our compassion, without losing our humaneness. Much good has been achieved. I am not one of those who thinks that everything is getting destroyed. Much good has been achieved, and it's been a very bold adventure of humanity in the quest for truth, I would say. For example, abolition of slavery, abolition of indentured labor, rights of workers, women's rights. All these have been by people like you and me, determined to build a humane, equitable, just society. What we have not avoided are the world wars, the inequalities, the disparities, the regional conflicts. The 20th century has been the century of the largest human migration because of wars, conflicts, starvation, poverty. It's been an era of environmental degradation, which has been caused not by the uneducated and the illiterate, but by the educated. We have polluted our rivers. We have polluted the air that we breathe. We have wantonly taken from nature without remembering that what we destroy cannot be replaced. And I'm therefore glad that our Millennium Development Goals have been now, the nomenclature has changed to Millennium Sustainable Goals. Because while an individual is important, and we've had this whole human rights movement, but the community is equally important. And unless the individual's aspirations are not balanced by what is good for the community, we cannot build a world which is worth living in. I have with me now Dr. Aruna Roy. I don't think she needs an introduction.
I'm very happy to be with you all today. I think we all seem to agree on the fundamentals of what we all want a humane society to be. Because when people ask me today, what is the idea of India? What is the dream of India? I say just go back to the preamble. Just read it 10 times over and you have the dream of an Indian society which is free from prejudice, free from inequalities, free from oppression, and where the famous statement of Dr. Ambedkar, one man, one vote. I don't know if my young friends at the back on top read Ambedkar today, but when we won our independence and he created the Indian Constitution, he said one man, one vote is today a political reality, but how long will it take for it to become an economic and social reality, where each of us claim equal space, equal rights, and equal access to the resources of this country. So, dear friends, liberty, equality, and fraternity, the idea of a just social order and of an equal society in which economic power is divided. In the last 68 years of our independence, we have come a long way, and I do not agree with the modern discourse and the contemporary discourse which tries to say that history doesn't exist and we recreate it every time a party comes to power. It is not possible. Political parties come and go, but the people go on forever. And this country is really fashioned by all of us, by you, by me, by the people in this room, and the large numbers who are outside. So I think every time this myth is created, we have to question it, and we have to say that we are all equal members in a society, and we should be equal members in framing this powerful discourse. What is it that has prevented these three beautiful words of liberty, equality, and fraternity from being a reality in India? I don't have to go over it in detail, but if I don't touch upon it, I can't place the next argument before you. One is the continuing existence of poverty. You can call it marginalization, you can call it the disenfranchised, you can use many words. But in this country, poverty exists. It is not a creation of the minds of social activists who want or don't want power, or those who are members of a political class which believes that poverty must be addressed. Poverty is a reality. And those of us who step outside Delhi, or even in Delhi, to the less privileged societies that live within amongst us, our domestic helps, the people who come and work for us in this country, we know that poverty exists, oppression exists, divisions exist, and that's the reality of today. Poverty exists because we have not addressed issues properly, but above and beyond all that, because there's corruption and there's arbitrary use of power. And once there is corruption and there's arbitrary use of power to protect that corruption, you will simply not have elimination of poverty or even addressing the issues in a realistic manner. So poverty and class discrimination has continued. At one point, because I was born on the cusp of independence, and I remember I lived and grew up in Delhi. I was technically born in Madras, or Chennai as it's called now. At the age of 4 months, I came to Delhi. I'm, in that sense, a Dilli wali. So if in my youth, in my childhood, in my infancy, I saw what partition had done to India. I knew what it had done to India. I was not witness, but I knew about the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi. Still remember the sense of loss that affected every single home in this country when he was assassinated, and especially what happened to citizens of Delhi. And every home went without food for 2 days. Nobody had the heart to cook. And as a young child, you feel these vibrations, you feel these emotions. So for us, discrimination on the basis of religion, which has refashioned itself and re-emerged as a threat to all of us, is for me a draconian horror. And for me, it brings up in me the fears and the apprehensions of a people who are really multi-religious and we have many more faiths apart from the straightforward religions. There are so many smaller groups of beliefs that exist in this country, and we are not part of a monolith that anyone wants to create in our name, whether we belong to one religion or don't, whether we are atheists or believers. Caste, which was again an issue which preoccupied us so much, and we wondered whether it would be finished off by modernity. It has been used by modernity. And I feel that caste is such a horrible division within and amongst people. Today, in modern India, just about 4 months ago, in Rajasthan, 4 Dalits were mowed under a tractor because they asserted their right to their land. Repeatedly, Dalits are victimized. There are social customs of untouchability that still exist in our schools in Rajasthan. They do not allow lower caste children to touch the water pot. If there is any menial task to be done, it's done by the lower caste children. So caste still exists, and unfortunately, identity vote casting in elections has reinforced the caste pattern, and we have not been able to really address it in the manner in which it should have been, and it has become another repetitive pattern in our lives. So far as gender is concerned, I'm a woman, and I've always enjoyed the fact that I'm a woman. I've never believed that being a woman is a position of weakness. I believe it's a position of strength. It's a great thing to be a woman. But gender and the reinterpretations of gender and the way gender is being used for all sorts of things in modern India, despite all the gains that we have had, speaks of the various battles that we still have to fight, the struggles we have to conduct to win those battles. But yet, in spite of all these things, I am a happy Indian, because I think the freedom with which I can speak today, no matter whether I represent a gender or a caste or a community, up to a certain point used to be my privilege and my prerogative. But increasingly today, there's a denial of dissent. If you decide that you want to express an opinion that people don't like, today you just take a gun and shoot them. 3 eminent people have lost their lives. Dabolkar in Pune, Comrade Pansare in Sholapur or Kolhapur, and Professor Kulbargi in Karnataka, because they just expressed opinions of rationality and called themselves rationalists. They were not talking about a religion, not talking against any religion. They were not talking about one particular caste. They just said they were rationalists. And gunmen mowed them down, shot them dead at point blank range. What is the message a person like me or you or anybody who expresses an independent opinion in India gets today from the facts that arise with the impunity with which these people have been killed? It has really, for me, posed a serious question as to whether India can really proceed further unless, with one voice, we protest against such deaths. It's not Professor Kulbargi who's been killed, it's you and me, and our independence that has been killed when Kulbargi was shot, or when Pansare was shot, or when Davolkar was shot. So there are threats. So in all this, I think, education is vitally important. So it is our duty to perform good social action, to go into the cities, go into the villages, and talk about the nature of privilege. And one of the things that we are doing in Rajasthan is doing a big campaign called Shiksha Ka Sawal, where students from Delhi and other places, privileged homes, are coming in as interns to go to visit each one of the local government schools in all the blocks of Rajasthan to find out whether they have basic amenities and enough teachers, and question through the RTI the privileges conferred on us by the right to education. So friends, today, what is the single biggest fear that our children will face in the coming years? And I think I have two great persons who bear this out with me. One is Rabindranath Tagore, who asked for where the mind is without fear, and a Krishnamurti who spoke about fear. It's also Christopher Isherwood, who speaks about how fear is the basis for all that's wrong in society. If you fill the mind of a child with fear about somebody who's different, somebody who has a different religion, a different caste, a different mind, a different attitude and a different opinion, you grow up with fears, and those fears lead you to the most irrational of actions. And I think dismantling those fears which the Springdale schools do, which my parents did, that I was not afraid of difference, I was not afraid of plurality, I was not afraid of different food or of different clothing or of different music or different people. And I think this essential understanding of difference is indeed one of the most important things education must do. And I think in Springdale you do it. And I think what we did as social activists to bring in a whole spate of rights-based laws with which to fight all these deprivations, whether it was the right to education, the right to information, the right to work through the MGNREGA, the right to food, the right to fight insecurity and discrimination in all forms of life. The moment you say these rights-based laws should be dismantled, which is the current discourse, and pinning everything down irrationally, building up these bogies. One of the bogies is that all underdevelopment, all backwardness, all lack of growth, all the figures of statistics have fallen because you have rights-based legislation. It's completely mythical, it's bogus, it's wrong. And every single analysis will prove to you that these rights-based legislations have in fact delivered. But because you have to find a victim and you have to bring in fear and hatred, you have to identify and have tokenism, you have to bring in bogies and mirages which allow people to have the fear, and because of this fear, to attack. Everyone who looks at these various issues will understand that the first and foremost thing in education is to understand this plurality, to understand that there are others, and understand that they have an equal right to live. I was reading one of my favorite writers, who's Eduardo Galeano, whom I heard once in Barcelona many years ago. He's a great thinker, and he writes, and he says that why should one dream, or why should one have utopias? And he says, utopias, somebody said to him, utopias don't exist. He said, of course utopias don't exist. But it's not the question of a utopia, but you're seeking that utopia. Because it's like the horizon. As you walk 10 steps towards it, the horizon shifts another 10 steps. So the utopias are like dreams. We create them because we must walk. And most important of all is the walking to those dreams. That's relevant and important, and it is these dreams that schools create, that education systems must create, and bolster with all the various things that they have to enable our children to dream, so that they dream of a world not where they aggrandize more and more, where there's advertisements more and more, where you perpetuate dowry through what a bride should wear, through high spending, but thinking of all the values that are inherent in our society and thinking of how there's a limit to how much the world can produce and that we must share what we have. And in that sharing lie the principles of liberty, equality, fraternity, of justice and equality. And unless we decide that we have to share this earth, we are doomed. As a woman, I remember one or two slogans which are very relevant. And I also remember what my friend Sushila did when she came to Delhi and she was asked, why have you come to fight for this right to information? You're an illiterate woman, what do you have to do? And she said, the government spends, when I send my son to the marketplace, when he comes back, I ask him for accounts. This government spends millions of rupees and billions of rupees in my name. Should I not ask for accounts? So she said, our money, our accounts. And that began a big slogan campaign all over this country where people understood that government money is our money. So the act of questioning is very important. If we forget to question and we forget to ask, then we are doomed to forever live without liberty or equality or fraternity, doomed ever to be in situations that we cannot change. The second thing is that we must dismantle these centers of power, which then aggrandize more and more to themselves. We have to understand that those centers of power must be questioned, and when they blame us, they call us seven-star activists, or they say that we are antisocial, they say that we are whatever. We have lots of epithets that social activists and political activists get. These are all generated and false information. So we have to fight false information, we have to give the right information, we have to fight for the right values, and for all that we must begin with questioning. And I think young minds begin there. So amongst the feminists, we say my life is a revolution. I don't wait for revolution to happen outside. My revolution is every minute of my life. When I question, when I ask for equality and justice, whether in the home, whether it's my workspace, or whether it's outside in the bigger, larger area of public space. So there cannot be a diminution of all these without ethics, without a basic understanding of public ethics. Public ethics will just not happen. It has to happen through questioning and through repeated answers and through struggle. The struggle is not only sitting in Jantar Mantar, it is also struggling within the school, within frameworks which we accept as given and which we can't question. So friends, I'll leave you with one quotation. I've been listening to so many things, but there's this Jeremy Cronin, a poet in South Africa, who says the basic thing about democracy, and it's important to all of us to realize that the Constitution only lives with us so long as the democratic process is alive. So if we are going to live by liberty, equality, and fraternity, we have to make sure that we have the rights to freedom of expression, the right to question, the right to practice religion, the right to practice so many other things. So when and how will this exist? It's in this act of questioning, but what do we ask? So in that process, he says that democracy is speaking truth to power. Democracy is speaking truth to power to make truth more accountable and power more accountable. If we do not question power through truth to be more accountable, we are finished. So it's asking these relevant questions that will take us to a society which is basically more humane. The humane society can happen only when we ask those difficult questions, those uncomfortable questions, and ask for judicious, rational, and reasonable replies. Thank you very much.